Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 11 of The Genius of Freemasonry by J.D. Buck. The origin of Freemasonry as a school of progressive moral science. Various Masonic writers have endeavored to trace the history of Masonry beyond such records, charters, and constitutions as have been accepted and verified with little more than conjecture for evidence. To discern the origin of the present institution as a growth from the guilds or trade unions existing prior to 1700 AD is justified by neither fact nor reason. No such germ could develop into such a flower and fruitage. None of these guilds can be shown to have possessed any such philosophy. That they were secret, cooperative, and fraternal is true, and that was their aim and object. They aimed at protection and secured exclusive privilege then as now. It is a common saying that a stream cannot rise higher than its source. The change from practical to speculative Masonry, as is claimed or recognized by those who trace its origin to these guilds, is left entirely unexplained. It is without a sufficient reason. Masonry is what they were not, viz., a great school of instruction, not in handicrafts, but in science and philosophy of individual life. The guilds appealed to self-interest and promised protection and special privilege. Masonry teaches its postulants to surrender self-interest and to aspire to that knowledge that promises no exclusive privilege, but stands for general enlightenment and beneficent service without the hope of fee or reward, thus annulling the very genius, origin, and purpose of the guild. While Masonry is speculative versus the practical charter of the guild, its very speculations have a universal bearing and character that are practical in a more specific and wider sense. Masonry is a progressive moral science. Instead of comparing Masonry with pre-existing cooperative bodies, where the members sought exclusive privilege, protection, and personal advantage, it should be compared with pre-existing bodies that aimed at higher education of the individual, instilling a broad philosophy of life and an exact and scientific knowledge of the spiritual nature of man, first setting him free from ignorance, superstition, and fear, and fitting him as a living stone in the temple of humanity, a master workman in the regeneration and elevation of the whole human race. If this be not true, then how are we to explain the 7 steps as applied to the liberal sciences and the references to Plato, Pythagoras, Zoroaster, Confucius, and others in certain degrees? By speculative Masonry, references strictly made to philosophy, science, ethics, and economics, and not to politics, statecraft, and handcraft. If the reader will turn to the quotation on another page, he will find the statement that, from the dawn of civilization to the present moment, 2 factors, 2 great underlying principles have been at work. At every stage of civilization, these contrasted and wholly opposite principles have been discerned by the advanced intelligences of that time, more or less clearly commented upon and acted upon, and the advocates of these opposing principles have found themselves more or less hostilely arrayed against each other. The advocates of power and privilege, as against the rights of the individual, whether priest or potentate, always jealous of his own interest and his wiser and more humane rival, and utterly unable to pervert or turn him from his work for humanity, has used every power known to tyranny, injustice, and opposition to restrain or to destroy him. This policy has led in all time to the concealment of the more advanced knowledge and its promulgation under the necessity and the seal of secrecy. The higher teachings of Jesus form no exception to this rule. He taught his disciples apart the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, and charged them on no more than one occasion that they tell no man. Sir Albert Pike has shown in his Morals and Dogma, by abundant quotations from the Church Fathers, that for the first 3 or 4 centuries after Christ, the Christian sect practiced initiation, had 3 degrees, the members of the lower degrees having no direct share in the knowledge, rites, or ceremonies of the higher, while the non-Christians were excluded from all. It is more likely that the term Mason, meaning builder, was used to create a semblance to the guild outwardly, and so to disguise the real purpose of the teaching of the lodge. But there came a time when they were interdicted altogether. This increased the secrecy and the precautions of the members and of their assemblies without preventing or destroying them. In Russia today, in spite of the Tsar and the most bigoted and tyrannical Greek church, secret societies, fairly honeycomb society, and their members are found among the bodyguard and house servants of the Tsar. That the idea and the necessity of secret organizations were alone any semblance of individual liberty, difference of opinion, or free speech would be tolerated, or escape punishment should be taken advantage of by plotters against governments, or even by societies of assassins, is perfectly natural. From the very beginning of this struggle, priest and potentate have equally concealed their designs and plotted in secret. The Pope and his minions today launch their maledictions and bitterest denunciations against secret societies, making this their first count against Masonry. And yet there is not on earth today an order so secret, plotting, and dangerous to the liberties of man as the order of Jesuits and the Roman hierarchy. So notorious are all these things that there are in every community today many good people who are down on secret organizations of all kinds. They see no need of them, no reason why any good thing should be concealed, and so connect secrecy with plotting and wickedness. If people would withhold judgment concerning beliefs with which they are entirely unfamiliar, and principles concerning which they ought to know that they really know nothing, then the necessity for secrecy in these matters would be at least greatly lessened. But there is still another reason why great truths with good men are held secret, and that is the impossibility of revealing them to the incompetent and the unprepared. The degrees in Masonry and the ancient mysteries were a necessity on the part of the candidate. Proficiency in the preceding degree was and is an organic necessity for the further progress and more light. There is both a natural and an orderly sequence in the acquirement of any real knowledge. This is recognized in the arts and sciences everywhere. A student in the common school who is allowed to pass to a higher grade before thoroughly mastering the lower is sure to fail in the higher. His trial will come and he will be found wanting. The students in the higher knowledge and more exact sciences become fewer and fewer as advancement is made, till only the few stand upon the heights and from their vantage ground face the beyond. Each of these, in all departments of knowledge and in all time, has been quick to recognize his peer. Thus, there has arisen the language of symbols, test words, generic ideas, that only the proficient or the initiated can understand. The aim of these real students is not to keep others in ignorance. Indeed, they are delighted to find any young person of promise interested and capable of acquiring knowledge. These principles that apply to the acquirement of knowledge in all departments are more especially applicable to the deeper and higher knowledge of the soul. Time, opportunity, seclusion, steadfastness, and determination in all ages have been deemed requisite for the acquirement of knowledge on the higher planes. To learn, to know, to dare, to do, and to keep silent has been the watchword in all time. It must be sought, and sought persistently, and in the right way. It means and has always meant a personal experience, not merely a tale that is told. Furthermore, an increased personal responsibility goes with such knowledge. The more knowledge a man has, the greater his power over and among his fellow men. The more intellectual strength and knowledge an individual possesses, if he is by nature selfish and vicious and unjust, the more injury he is capable of doing to his fellows. Perhaps no good and wise man would take pains or go out of his way to keep such a person in ignorance, but certainly he would not take pains to increase his knowledge unless assured beyond all doubt that the deepening of the sense of personal responsibility and cultivation of the moral sense went with every advance in knowledge. Hence, to the personal experience is added the living of a life in conformity with the best interest of society. The chemist who pursued his studies in order to discover some new explosive that he might terrorize the world and hold men in subjection through fear would be punished for his crime rather than lauded for his skill and knowledge. In other words, knowledge is power, and both knowledge and power measure and determine personal responsibility under natural, human, and divine law. Nothing can be more shallow and inconsiderate than the cry often heard in all time and today. If he has such knowledge and is so valuable, why does he not shout it from the housetops and give it to the world? One need only point for an answer to Jesus, Socrates, Bruno, and Savonarola, and almost every other name in history of men who knew the truth and dared to attempt the enlightenment of mankind. Masonry and Masons form no exception at this point. The selection after due trial, the preparation of the candidate, and progress through proficiency in the preceding degree is ever an essential, no less for the real enlightenment of the candidate than for the preservation of the knowledge unaltered and the protection of the lodge. He who apprehends the real genius of Freemasonry and who has understood and applied the lessons of the lodge will find no difficulty in discerning the same signs, principles, and usages throughout the past. By their works ye shall know them. By the promises and inducements held out may they, one and all, be measured. They all fall naturally and inevitably into one of the two classes herein before referred to. They all appeal either to the selfish or the altruistic element in man. They all aim to hold in bondage and exploit him, or to enlighten and set him free. They claimed special gifts or advantages held and bestowed for a consideration, or they held out no other inducement except knowledge and opportunity for the better service of mankind. No intelligent Mason will have a moment's doubt when comparing Masonry with any of these. The disciples of Plato, Pythagoras, Zoroaster, Confucius, Lao-Tzu, and Jesus practiced the Golden Rule, and their traditions, landmarks, and usages long ago were affiliated with Masonry. They are Masonic by adoption, though Masonry is not the linear descent of any of them. But when it is once clearly understood that in every generation good men and true have discerned these basic principles, placed themselves on the side of equity and fraternity, and sought to inculcate them among their fellow men, we shall find them referring to the same principles and practically engaging in the same great work. And whether we name them Platonists, Pythagoreans, or Zoroastrians, all Masons will hail them as brothers. Moreover, if we study the writings or characters of the founders of any of these orders or societies, we found them talking of the same things and adhering essentially to the same doctrines. To discover, exemplify, preserve, and transmit to prosperity seems to have been their steadfast aim. The central character in Masonry seems purposely made a mythical representative of these ancient sages. The widow's son stands facing the ruffians throughout all time. On the one hand stands the man, loyal and true, who would lay down his life in defense of the truth and of his own integrity. On the other are the ruffians who make their demands out of time and in defiance of all justice and right. Both come to their own reward, measured by exact justice. It justly may be doubted if these great truths were ever anywhere else more clearly portrayed and dramatically represented than in the ritual of the lodge, nor can any intelligent witness or listener fail to see the application. It is to every candidate indeed an initiation, a lesson, an instruction, a personal experience. He can never forget it when it was first made entrance in his heart, and he can never be quite the same man afterward if he be really sincere. He does not witness a play. He represents a principle and enacts a character. He becomes, for a time, quite another personality. He does not imagine himself in another place. He is like a soldier whose leader has fallen in battle and who seizes the flag and springing to the head of the column carries it unflinchingly to victory or to death. Every brother Mason will claim to have been initiated in the lodge. It is my purpose to show what real initiation is. It is not a ceremony performed altogether by others, but a personal experience altogether new and never quite forgotten. Such has real initiation been everywhere and in all ages. The whole life of man on earth is an initiation, that is, a series of personal experiences. In no other way does he really learn anything. A personal experience brings more or less into action the capacities, faculties, and powers of the individual. He feels, senses, perceives, thinks, reasons, acts, learns, knows. This is a personal experience. It is the real genius of Freemasonry to reveal this process, apply this means, and gain this result. A personal experience. The block of knowledge, selected for this purpose and revealed in this way to the candidate for initiation, is not only the sum and substance of the wisdom of the ages, but it is selected with such care, condensed in such concise form, and imparted in such a way as to bring to all focus all past experience of the candidate, and place in his hand and heart not only the elements and faculties of all future growth, but at the same time make clear his pathway and light his progress for all future time. Among the Jewels of the Lodge. This is the crown jewel. Condense the meaning and application of the three greater and the three lesser lights of the lodge and see if they do not mean exactly this, no more, no less. As outer symbols, these lights may be, and sometimes are, flippantly passed by, but as illuminations in the intelligent and conscientious soul of man, incorporated there as a personal experience, they are a different thing altogether. On entering the lodge, the candidate is divested of all superfluities. He is not only poor indeed, but he bears the badge of the most abject slavery. Moreover, he is helpless, needing a God to direct his course. Eventually, he is brought to the light and clothed with honor. From what is he really set free? From all the turmoils of ignorance, superstition, and fear of his former life, and from their bondage in the outer world, whence he came. Henceforth he is to be a man, a Freemason. If he is already that in his heart, and he realizes and henceforth utilizes his personal experience in initiation, he is forever free from the enslaving and corrupting influence of that other power which would keep him in ignorance, play upon his superstitions, and control him by fear. Through a personal experience, he has entered a new world, recognized his own powers and responsibilities, taken his destiny as a Freemason into his own hands, and begun a new life. He not only stands upright, facing the east, but he is prepared to face the world with uprightness, guided by intelligence and imbued with fraternal kindness and love. Now, whence came such a body of knowledge, clearly conceived, concisely organized, intelligently and successfully imparted to the candidate during a personal experience in initiation and undergoing no essential change for at least 200 years. Like Minerva springing full-formed from the brain to Jupiter, this wisdom in all its essentials was planted in Freemasonry about 200 years ago. It had a beginning in and for the Western world, and must have had an author, conceiver, transmitter. It is not a growth nor an evolution in the order of Freemasonry itself, like modern chemistry, physics, or any other arts and sciences in the outer world. Hiram, the widow's son, the ruffians, and the essential elements of the tragic drama were as familiar to the Mason of 1717 AD as to us of 1909. Whether Bacon or Shakespeare wrote those immortal plays, someone who had the necessary intelligence wrote them. Certainly the carpenters, stonemasons, and architects of 200 years ago were far less intelligent or well educated than their representatives today. We can come to but one logical conclusion: the genius of Freemasonry, the personal experience through initiation, was devised and instituted by some initiate who had gone that way before. He transmitted to us only that which he himself had received, and only in the way he had received it, and not unto others, except after trial they were found worthy to receive it. Every real initiate perceives the traditions and the landmarks, obeys the laws, conforms to the usages, and protects the sacred word in the secret vault through all time. He can impart the royal secret only in one way. If he tries some other way, he not only fails, injures the candidate or himself, who would climb up some other way, but proves himself unworthy and in time loses the secret itself. Those who are interested in pursuing this subject further are referred to Chapter 4 of the great work written by Brother Mason. The opinion is often expressed by hundreds of the most intelligent Freemasons today, and there is a very deep significance in the philosophy, symbolism, and principles of Freemasonry, and that this deeper knowledge generally goes unrecognized and disregarded. This is really a deep intuition, a direct recognition by the individual intelligence. If asked to define these deeper truths or even to prove their existence, they may be unable to do so, but their deep convictions remain nevertheless unchanged. This intuitive knowledge is the kinship of the soul with truth, a guiding light to all who recognize it. Intuition may not formulate theorems in mathematics, but it throws a light on life's numberless equations and leads the mind in the search of truth. Emerson quotes Swedenborg as saying, "It is no proof of man's understanding to be able to confirm whatever he pleases, but to be able to discern that what is true, and that what is false. This is the mark and character of intelligence." Careful attention, observation, and reflection regarding the work of the Lodge, the dramatic realization of the personal experience of every candidate initiated in the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, ought to enable every really intelligent and thoughtful person to realize that here is an epitome of the essentials that go to make up every individual character, define personal responsibility, and stand as a guiding light to all future progress. I'm not trying to read into Freemasonry a meaning, fantastic, mystical, or transcendental. I am urging the desirable, the utility, and the necessity that every Masonic brother shall realize his own possessions, simply that he may appreciate and utilize them. Whence these treasures of wisdom and beneficence came he may never know, nor need he care what they are, how they may be utilized, and what duties and responsibilities they define and determine are other questions entirely. These are questions of individual intelligence and sincerity alone, not above the capacities and powers of any just and upright Mason, and it is to such only that this appeal was made. The historical controversy is of little importance. That the deep philosophy and the profound epitome of wisdom could not possibly emanate from those who showed no sign whatever of possessing it, like the guilds and trade unions of 200, all came from another source, viz., from years ago, ought to be self-evident. That those who did and who do show abundant signs of possessing it, has a still deeper significance. Equally important with the clear recognition of what Masonry is and what are its lines of descent is the clear recognition of what that other organization is, that is everything which Masonry is not, and that hates, persecutes, curses, and seeks in every way to destroy Masons and Masonry throughout the ages. The gauntlet hurled at Masonry by the Roman Catholic Church, which has not a single feature in common with the religion of Jesus, has been too long ignored and treated with either indifference or silent contempt. It should be recognized and clearly defined. Each body should stand on its own principles before the world and let an intelligent public opinion and the progress of civilization decide between them. If Masonry is not in line with these, the sooner that fact is recognized and Masonry regulated to destitute and oblivion, the better for all concerned. It is a purely human institution, the ripe fruit of endless generations of wise and noble men seeking solely to serve mankind. Masonry is not the enemy of religion, but it is the avowed, relentless, and eternal enemy of the methods and preposterous claims of clericalism, just as clericalism is the enemy of all true religion. That the arrogant claims of clericalism should be tolerated anywhere or by anyone in the light of the 20th century is the most amazing fact that can anywhere be found. Anyone realizes what is implied in thus perpetuating the grossest superstitions of the Dark Ages would suppose that the genius of the present age would laugh it to scorn. But when one also realizes that it counts on ignorance, relies solely upon superstition and fear, holds in ignorance its trusting disciples, and claims for itself the prerogative of God, the wonder ceases. The light of the 20th century has not yet penetrated the ignorance of the masses. They are held in bondage by economic conditions that they have thus far been unable to overcome, and they are exploited now, as in the past, by those who are cunning as serpents, but by no means as harmless as doves. This exploitation is worldwide and world-long. It seems to be the price paid for enlightenment and liberty. The most honorable sarcasm lies in the fact that it is all done in the name of the man of sorrows, and thus belies his whole nature and his mission among men. Those who crucified him were angels of light when compared with those who crucify him daily, century after century. Jesus regarded the doctrines he taught as greater than himself and dearer than his own life. Hence he died to give them life. The Jews have been cursed, hated, and persecuted for nearly 2,000 years as the crucifier of Jesus. But those who have sophisticated his doctrines and so misinterpreted his whole mission are far more guilty. Political clericalism perverts all the teachings of Jesus by its record and its doctrines. It represents their complete antithesis. On the contrary, Freemasonry stands for, advocates, and does its best to practice all that Jesus taught. The sign of truth is that it agrees with itself and is consistent from beginning to end. Error is self-contradictory and contradicts truth. Freemasonry is a progressive school of moral science and is perfectly consistent from beginning to end with the Sermon on the Mount and all that Jesus taught. It teaches that right conduct and economic justice are the foundations and preparation for the religion of Jesus, which clericalism has delayed and defeated to the extent of its powers for centuries. In the crusade which clericalism has inaugurated for the conquest of America, these same issues again are to be fought out. Freemasonry is squarely aligned with freedom, justice, equity, and right, and it claims fellowship with all the heroes and martyrs who throughout the ages have fought the same great battle against darkness and despotism, cruelty and fear, in their effort to enslave mankind. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. If you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.